Thank you, Rachel, and good afternoon, everybody. I have about 45 minutes to take you through the trends in the industry. We're going to cover a lot of different topics. As you know, normally I've opened this conference. We've tried the experiment of going last. And as I've sat through the morning sessions, I've realized that the script that I wrote 1 or 2 weeks ago is no longer relevant. And we're going to have to make it up on the fly, as we've been through so many interesting presentations. So bear with me. But the opening point I want to make is a very important one. More for the vendors in the room than yourselves, but also for yourselves. You are doing really well. The channel is really healthy. More than 45% of you told us before this conference that you would grow by at least 10% in Q4, revenues by 10% in Q4. Over lunch, I spoke to one partner who's growing 35% this quarter, another one who's doing 55%, and then another one who's doing over 140% growth. So the vendors don't need to tell you how to change. You're doing a very good job of rolling with the market. And what I'm going to show you over the next 45 minutes is the situation is only going to get better. And if your business is not doing well, I'm afraid that's down to leadership, because there are so many opportunities for you to go after. So let's talk about some of the changes we see in the industry. We are going through a period of extraordinary change. We heard EMC, for example, mention the importance of flash storage and see how quickly that's come on into the first tier of storage. In wireless, Wi-Fi, we're also seeing a revolution around AC technology. And what Wi-Fi with AC is doing is allowing multi-tenant solutions. So you can deploy a solution for a shopping mall in its entirety and then parcel up the Wi-Fi network so that each individual shop has its own network and the public has a free access network as well. It's a massive opportunity to sell Wi-Fi around the world. We are seeing obviously huge growth in data center build out, both through the branded vendors, but also an uptake of white box servers and software-defined everything. We are seeing software-defined storage, software-defined data centers, software-defined networking come throughout the industry, creating more value for those who can sell and configure those products. Hyper-converged infrastructure is super hot. And for those people who say there's no future in hardware, I'd like to make 2 comments. One is Apple makes nearly all its revenue from selling hardware, but also perhaps more interestingly, a company called Nutanix in the hyper-converged space has already been valued at around $2 billion from a virtual startup. There is money to be made in hardware if you're in the right space. Something else that's changed this year, there have been far fewer acquisitions than previously. The big vendors have slowed down their rate of acquisitions by around 30% year on year. And that is probably because startup valuations have simply been so high that they reckon that most of the acquisitions are unaffordable. And instead we see a change. We see several vendors deciding to get smaller. IBM, of course, sold off the X series business to Lenovo. But also now we've seen HP decide to split into 2, as well as Symantec. There is a move from companies getting bigger and bigger on the vendor side to more focused and leaner examples. Juniper too decided to get out of wireless networking and partner with Aruba instead. Of course, for every trend, there are changes. There's a counter trend. And of course, Lenovo is the one that's been expanding, both by acquiring Motorola, I think closed last week, as well as the IBM series. Microsoft too bought Nokia right at the beginning of this year. I wanted to highlight a couple of favorites I've seen this year as I travel around the world. Thomas didn't mention it, but definitely the coolest thing I've seen this year is Skype Translate, demonstrated at Microsoft Worldwide Partner Conference in Washington. And it was too good to be true. Apparently it's going to launch by the end of this year, so we'll be able to see those dreams come through. But what they showed on stage in front of about 10,000 people was a chap speaking English over a Skype call to a lady in Germany. The voice, he spoke in English, the voice would come out machine translated, spoken in German. The lady replied in German. The machine translated it, came back in English. And they had a 2-way conversation. Our hope, I don't know if it'll be possible, is that by next year when you get to this conference, you'll be able to have my voice translated into text and click 1 for Chinese, click 2 for Hindi, click 3 for etc. And we'll be able to deliver that kind of technology. That's the way it's going. It was very impressive. But something else really cool was from Cisco, the SX10, small desk-based telepresence solution. Very easy to set up, costing only around $1,000 a box. Big telepresence has been shrinking, but the SX10 was really cool. And when I said that the distributors are, the channel partners are doing well, it's also worth noting the distributors who are so important to this event are doing well. Those that are publicly quoted have their share prices at or near all-time highs, and they too are certainly growing in the 5% space and sometimes in the 10% area. And these are very large companies to put in that kind of growth rates. Some of the reasons why distributors are doing well is the distribution model has won. The two-tier model is the de facto standard. Witness the fact that Dell is now doing all it can to develop a two-tier distribution model around the world. 2 or 3 years ago, EMC too committed to that space, and you see how now they're a totally loyal channel company. And then also the other part of distribution is they've moved into mobility very well, making acquisitions and developing their smartphone business, and that's also helped to contribute to growth. So we're in an industry that's in good shape. Some other things that have happened. The PC market has recovered this year, partly driven in the corporate space by Windows XP replacement, but also by lower price points in the consumer market, particularly around Microsoft's Windows for Bing promotion, dramatically lowering the price of entry-level PCs and getting the consumer market again. We didn't expect the PC market to do quite as well as it had. And another favorite story of mine from this year, I had dinner a few weeks ago with one of the top Italian partners. He's moved very heavily into managed services, which we'll come on to. Around half of his business is annuity managed services. He owns 2 massive data centers in 2 different countries. And at the end of the dinner, as we got onto the grappa, I said to him, by the way, what's your most profitable business? And he paused for thought and he said, selling PCs. There is still money to be made selling PCs, and some of you are doing that. So the PC market has also been very strong and recovered. But of course, as we progressed, there have also been challenges, particularly in this region. The relationship to China and the rest of Asia has become more complicated on a political scale, but also in terms of the technology industry. And many of the vendors, and Thomas just spoke to this a little bit, have the US vendors have seen their sales decline in China. And that's some of the reasons why the vendors are not growing as fast as the channel partners are. And some of the big vendors like HP, IBM, pretty stable and not able to grow. China has been going backwards for them. There is a split emerging between China and the rest of Asia. And indeed, this year, both HP and Cisco have segmented China out of their Asian organizations into an independent business. That's making life complicated for the distributors in the room who operate across the region. They now have to work with 2 different units rather than 1. Some of this is political reasons. Some of this is because China is doing a good job of developing its own independent industry separate from the US industry. And this is happening in a lot of areas. We've obviously heard about Lenovo and Huawei, but think of the other successes now coming out of China. Alibaba, a very successful IPO in the US just a few weeks ago. Baidu, Xiaomi, Yulong, Oppo, very strong in the smartphone space. 3 of the world's top 5 smartphone vendors are now Chinese. We have Inspure in the systems integration space, Kingsoft in the desktop productivity software space, and Yonyu in enterprise management software. We are seeing emergence of a parallel industry, mostly in China today, with a few exceptions, but we'll be interested to see if those companies start to emerge. And maybe we'll start to have more Chinese sponsors at this event next year. There is new competition. That's bad news for some of our sponsors, but it's good news for each of you because you'll have more choices as to who to partner with. Some other things that are going on. The price of oil is falling dramatically. Why is the price of oil falling dramatically? It's because the US has produced a massive amount of shale gas and has become independent in terms of energy supply, dramatically lower energy prices. But it's also because Saudi Arabia wants to pressure prices lower to force some pressure on some of the other competitors in the market. and we've seen oil prices fall. This is going to provide a major stimulus to economies around the world and could contribute as much as 0.5% GDP growth extra next year if oil prices stay where they are. So that is good news for each of you. It should give us a natural stimulus of where the growth's coming from. However, electricity is not normally produced by oil. Electricity is produced by coal, it's produced by nuclear, it's produced by gas. And we have a problem that electricity is becoming short. Many countries are having struggles to fulfill their electricity requirements. And this is a challenge, particularly for the IT industry. The biggest cost of running a data center is energy. And if we can't secure a supply of cheap electricity, we will have a problem. So the need to conserve and renew energy is very important, and the need to optimize data center management with energy is very important. By specializing in energy, you guys can do very, very well. If you're the experts on how to optimize energy supply to data centers in your country, you can have a very bright future. This is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. The number one issue around the world for IT managers is security. And the risk and if issues related to security have become bigger than ever before. Security has been an ongoing issue. It is now the number one issue. There was, of course, in the US, the high-profile attack of Target, a retailer, where it lost millions of credit card details. And, of course, the interesting part of that case was it wasn't the CIO who was fired, but the CEO was fired. Security is now a board-level issue for companies around the world. The US is behind many countries in terms of not having chip and pin deployment, relying too much on the signature. Some countries in Asia are ahead of them, a couple are behind them. And that's why the US has been so vulnerable to this particular issue. Chip and pin is coming to the US next year. All the retailers are having to upgrade their systems. That is why it's a good time for Apple to launch Apple Pay, because it can get the technology into the new systems that the retailers are about to deploy. But there have been some more interesting breaches. The NASDAQ, the US stock exchange, was hacked this year. Some interesting things about that. For 3 months, they did not know they were hacked. So for 3 months, the hack went on and they weren't able to identify it. And then when they discovered they'd been hacked, they didn't know who had done it, and they didn't know why they were doing it. And this issue was so serious that President Obama was briefed on the status of the NASDAQ hack regularly, because there was a potential that someone was trying to bring down the whole US financial system. In fact, most likely, the hack was done by another government from another country who didn't want to bring down the US financial system. They just wanted to copy the code for their own stock exchanges. It happened this year. UPS, the parcel delivery company, was also hacked. Suffered a malware attack, to be more accurate. They didn't identify it either. They only found out they'd been hacked when the government secret services told them that they'd been hacked, even though they had a full security team inside the IT. The issues of state surveillance and state espionage have become larger and larger and larger. Security is not now about stopping teenage boys doing rogue things on the network for a piece of fun. Security is a very, very serious issue from the state, from your competitors. You need to tell these stories to your customers. And if you can tell these stories to your customers and then help them down the path of protecting the CEO's jobs, having board-level conversations, you will have a very rich future. This issue is only going to get bigger and bigger. And we heard Nick Earl from Cisco talk this morning about the importance of keeping data in a country, data sovereignty. And he's absolutely right. Keeping your data in your own country doesn't guarantee it's more secure. But what keeping data in your own country means is you do at least know which legal situation you are in and which law you are operating under, which of course simplifies everything. Once you go out of country, you're out of control. The legal systems certainly cannot keep up. Thomas talked to this, and you've talked to us quite a lot about this. The biggest trend we see in the channel is the transition to managed services. Around 60% of you today are already in the annuity business, as you told us in a survey a few weeks ago. And by 2017, virtually all of you expect to be in the annuity business. You told us that your goal is to get from 19% of your revenues today to 37% by 2017. IT as a service is everywhere. It's not just software. It is partly software, but it's also in printing, it's in security, it's in IT infrastructure, and it's in software. Microsoft, of course, is driving this transition harder than anybody else, but they're not alone. VMware, HP, Cisco, EMC, and others are all pushing you in this direction. Virtually all of you tell us that once you've moved to managed services, that becomes the most profitable part of your business. So it's a very good goal to have, and it's a rewarding goal to have. But it's also a challenging transition. How do you manage the shortage of cash, particularly as you move through this transition? And how do you change your incentives for the sales force to stop selling kit and moving into a managed service model? So there are challenges. Your finance guy, or lady, I should say, your finance guy or lady is really important in terms of doing a managed services transition. And we would just caution you to go down that path, but not go down that path too rapidly, because we've seen companies fail that have tried to transition in an 18-month period, just run out of cash and go bankrupt. So we are recommending vendors push annuity services through the channel, but it's a good way of locking customers in and increasing value. But you need to be careful about the pace of change and be very focused on the financial implications. Everyone, all four of our keynotes today have dedicated their sessions to cloud, or a big part of their sessions to cloud. We know now, and I think that came through very clearly this morning, that the default for the future is the hybrid cloud, a mixture of on-premise, co-location, private cloud, public cloud. And again, who is best placed to deliver those complex scenarios? You are. And you don't need to offer A or B to your customers. You need to be able to offer the mix to your customers. And some of the solutions from Cisco around Intercloud, from IBM around SoftLayer, from HP around Helion, these are really useful to you because these are channel-friendly companies coming in with the multiple cloud solutions. It is the way to go. But I now want to talk to you about what has become the most famous part of cloud, which is infrastructure as a service. So let's just focus particularly on infrastructure as a service. And I know some of you in the room are doing it, so listen very carefully. Fact, in its financial results a week or so ago, Amazon, the whole company, reported a loss of over $400 million. There's very few details in that loss as to what caused that loss. It's remarkably flaky in terms of reasons why they suddenly lost such a large amount of money. But in our estimates, the modeling we've done on their financial business model suggests that Amazon Web Services in the last 4 quarters has lost $2.8 billion. It's a catastrophic business model from a profitability point of view. And why is this? What's happening? Well, first of all, there is big competition in infrastructure as a service. There's lots of small providers, but also Microsoft and Google are going very hard after the business that Amazon created. What that's doing is leading to price reductions. And in the second quarter of this year, price reductions were around 50%, halved. We're trying to grow a business, you're losing money, and you have to halve prices. Amazon's been struggling with slower growth, because its customers have a choice now of other providers to go to. But what we're also seeing at Amazon and some of the other cloud providers is their capital expenditure is going up and up and up. Last quarter, they spent $1.4 billion on capital investments, and that growth was around 33%. So their expenditure on capital is growing faster than their revenues. That's not a good place to be. To us, the economics behind the infrastructure as a service model represent a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme. You need to sign up customers and you build a data center. But those customers need to do more and more and expect more performance and higher service level agreements, and you have competitors pushing you down that direction. So you have to build more and more infrastructure to keep the customers happy. It works if you're signing up new customers really fast because you've got new revenue growth to cover your capital expenditure. But if you have to cut prices faster than you can sign up new customers and your revenue flatlines, you suddenly find your capital expenditure still exploding to chase the service level agreements you've already committed to. Amazon only has $5 billion in the bank. It's a totally different business to Google, which has around 60 billion, Microsoft, which has close to 90 billion. And we don't think this business model is sustainable for much longer. Within 12 months, when we come back to this conference, we would expect something serious to happen. The infrastructure as a service model will have burst. And then we'll have a shakeout, and then it will be good news for all of you, because then we will be pricing things to make a profit, not to make a loss and a serious loss, and we'll have more choice about which path to go down based on a fair pricing model. And what I recommend to each of you is, if you're working with cloud providers or you're becoming a cloud provider yourself, you need to be able to show financial due diligence to your customers. If your customer is deploying cloud, you need to say to them, look at the P&L, look at the balance sheet. Can you be sure your cloud provider will be around in 12 months or 2 years' time? And make sure they are. And if they won't show you the financial data, I would suggest that's a warning sign. And be very, very careful. You have been warned. The cloud is coming, but the infrastructure as a service model is not working economically. Something has to change. The losses are simply too big. Our industry needs to develop in terms of how we market and sell our products. I think it was, again, Nick talking about when Harry met Sally, the amount of spending going towards marketing and business differentiation, rather than just IT to keep a company going. You need to become more sophisticated about how you manage and motivate your sales force. So I want to share with you a little example. Think of Vivek. He's in product development, and he's got really excited about a new project management solution, a software as a service-based solution that promotes collaboration. Sarah in HR is worried that if they deploy that solution, the cost of training will be rather high, and she doesn't have budget for training. But Aki-san is in customer services. And what he sees is another new piece of software coming along, another silo of product information, none of it integrated into his existing support structure, and he's rather concerned. Then Lan Fen in IT thinks the solution in the cloud is not secure. And then Krishna in finance thinks the total cost of ownership is too high. We have gone from a model where we sell to IT. We've gone to a model where we have to sell across these different business groups. Can you and your teams speak those different languages? Can you assure the IT guy that it's secure? Can you do a return on investment analysis to convince finance it's a cost saving, not an extra cost? Can you integrate these diverse databases and convince them that you can bring all of these solutions together? If you can, you're going to have a very good future. We heard Nick Lazaridis this morning talk about the HP smartwatch. Looks rather cool, launched last week. We are going to see an explosion of these devices. Last year, remember, no one mentioned it today, but last year the trend was bring your own device. So what's the trend this year? The trend is wear your own device. And of course, the poster child for this is Apple launching the Apple Watch. How successful will the Apple Watch be? Well, Apple made a big play of the fact that this is going to be a really accurate watch, I think within 50 milliseconds. That isn't going to sell it. That doesn't do it. Apple says you can read mails and SMS on your phone. We don't think that's very useful on your watch. We think that's not very useful because you can do it on your phone. The watch might be rather good at tracking sleep patterns. The only problem is you have to charge it every night, so you won't be wearing it, so it won't track your sleep. Yes, you can have your music and your photos on the watch, but how useful is that? Where the watch could be really successful is in health, particularly if it includes a sweat sensor. If it includes a sweat sensor, it can measure your sugar levels. There is a big issue in the global population around diabetes. If people could have real-time, constant tracking of their sugar levels, that would be a major step forward. We don't know the final specs of the Apple Watch, but Daniel, our wearables analyst, does not believe the sweat sensor is in version 1 of the Apple Watch, unfortunately. That would have been a hit. There are going to be some nice features around personal gestures. But the real question is, will the Apple Watch be successful? We think in the first 6 months, there's enough people who just love Apple that they will buy the watch. It will be a craze. But if the sales are going to be sustained beyond that, Apple needs its app developer community to come out with something really cool. We don't know what that is. I guess we'd develop it ourselves if we knew what it was. But maybe their community can do that. But so far, they haven't shown that there is a killer app. And we'll have to wait and see. There's a lot of challenges. One of the other problems with the watch is it has a different charger. It doesn't have a micro USB charger. They have to have a magnet charger. The reason for that is a watch can't have an open part because it needs to be water resistant. But what a pain it is to have to carry around another charger on all of our travels. So the Apple is cool, but it will all depend on the third-party apps. And Android Wear is not far behind, and now Microsoft has moved into this space. Apple doesn't have the lead that it's had in some other categories. And Android Wear, unlike Android, is a closed system. Google's taking tight control over the specs so that it can deploy one OS and make manufacturers in the Windows mold comply to the spec that it's given. So there will be lots of emulation. You could think about how wearable computing can impact your business going forward. It will have some benefits, but it may take some time to play. Something more interesting is going on in the next category. How many of you sell drones? Does anyone in the room sell drones? Do I have to offer champagne to someone? No? Or you're all being shy? Have you thought about how drones can change your business? None of our sponsors have launched drones. But let me give you some examples of what's already being deployed. In Africa, gamekeepers are sending drones over safari parks to catch poachers. It's much more efficient to use a drone than send people out in trucks and scare the animals and all the rest of it. Farmers are using drones to find lost cows on their fields. Again, much better than having to go out yourself and look for the cow. And if it's lost, you can see where it is and does it need help or not. In Italy, 2 Italian examples today. Someone very clever on the Amalfi coast, little villages on the sea in Italy over the summer, decided that finally they would teach Italians they have to park legally. Because what they did was sent a drone around the village, taking pictures of all the illegally parked cars and made a lot of money issuing parking tickets. But probably the most important drone example is an airline called EasyJet. Each time we fly, you probably know, the airlines have to send out a person to do a visual inspection of the plane. Check it's still got 2 wings and some wheels and windows and all that kind of stuff. EasyJet now does that with drones. So you think the benefit is, okay, someone doesn't have to walk around the plane, they can sit in an office and do it. But that isn't the real secret. By using the drone to take a picture of the plane every flight, they're able to compare the video from this flight with the video of the last flight, and immediately use analytic software to see if anything on the plane has changed. So become much more accurate in terms of how they're able to identify potential faults in the planes. And our favorite drone example, I'm not suggesting you do this in your business, but of course where they've been a real hit is prisoners. What do prisoners want? Drugs. How do you get drugs into a prison or a jail today? You fly a drone in when they're doing the exercise and drop the drugs into the playground where they can pick them up. There are challenges around drones. Regulation is coming. Insurance. What do you do if it crashes and it falls on someone's head, etc.? There are some challenges. But think about what you can do with drones. We've certainly been thinking about that inside our business. And perhaps even more importantly, this example of a robot. There is a hotel now in California, in Cupertino, a Loft Hotel, part of the Starwood Group, that is piloting robots for room service. And what they're able to do is someone calls down, it's a low-cost hotel, it doesn't have many staff. Someone says, I'd like a Coke. They put the Coke into the top of the robot, program, please go to room 42. The robot goes off and delivers the Coke. meaning someone can stay at the desk answering the phones and the customer is served. Now, what's the interesting thing about the robot? How does it use the elevators? And the only way, of course, it can use the elevators is if the elevators are connected to the Wi-Fi network. So think of the channel partner who sold that robot. Okay, he might make a few $100s selling the robot, but of course he's got to reprogram the whole of the elevators and building to cope with the systems that the robot needs. What an opportunity that is for channel partners. So look out for drones and robots and how they can make a difference. We saw Bill and Nick talk about 3D printing. 3D printing, we mentioned last year, in fact, Meg Whitman in Bangkok first announced HP's launch or plan to launch 3D printers 1 year ago at our event. Printer hardware, 3D printer hardware, is already around the world over $1 billion as a business. And the hardware sales this year are growing at 80%, 80%. 3D Systems and Stratasys lead the market today. They share around half the business between them, and they are looking for channel partners as fast as they possibly can. When we surveyed you a few weeks ago, 43% of you said you wanted to go into 3D printing. Where does 3D printing make the most sense today? One is in health, and there are some amazing life-changing examples in the health industry. In China, 3 months ago, some poor boy who had a cancer of the vertebrae at the back had the vertebrae removed and replaced by a 3D printed vertebrae. Now, the brilliance of this is, first of all, it's custom built to meet his shape, match the one that's been taken out. But more importantly, they were able to perforate the end of the 3D printed part so that it joined to the bones in his body, existing bones in his body, without any screws, any bolts, and it goes on to live inside his body. That is life-changing. Hearing aids can be 3D printed. Teeth can be 3D printed. And for any of you about to have a baby, you'll soon be able to go into a hospital, or your wives will be able to go into a hospital, and instead of getting a black and white ultrasound of your future baby, you can have a 3D printed model. I can imagine that being big in Japan. In manufacturing, we're seeing a big investment by seeding students, design studios with 3D printers, giving them the tools they need to become the next generation of engineers. And in transportation, 3D printing is already well established. In Formula One, they don't have to ship parts around the world. They carry a printer with them and print them on the spot. But perhaps our favorite example, again, comes from the airline industry. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner has over 30 3D printed parts. Now, that isn't about convenience of manufacturing or build to order. The reason why they're using 3D printed parts is a printer can do a complex shape. So rather than have to bolt 3 different things together to make a shape, it's one unit. That makes it more robust and stronger. But more importantly, it makes it lighter. And if you can save 1 kilogram of weight in an airliner, you save $150,000 a year in fuel. That is the transformation that we're seeing in the airline industry. So again, this is somewhere you need to be thinking about. And continuing with the airline theme, very sadly, we had this awful tragedy of the MH370 disaster earlier on this year. Very tragic for everyone involved. But our industry really should be pushing hard to make sure at least that kind of disaster can never happen again. Airlines still use black boxes that track 88 parameters of data. And when the plane goes down, we have to hunt for the black box. Why is that data not streamed over the Inmarsat satellites and collected for every flight in the world, so that at least we know where the planes are? There are big issues around doing this. One is the cost of the satellite transmission, probably about $2,000 a flight. They've got to pay for that. But also, we're going to have an explosion of capturing all this data. Do you send it every second, every minute, etc.? Probably the answer to that issue is for the airplane to only send data when something changes, when the plane goes up, accelerates, the temperature changes, etc. But this is a wonderful example of how big data can make a real difference. Why hasn't it happened? Well, one is lack of investment by the airlines, not keeping up to date with technology, but also who manages this data? Who can access it? Under which legal framework, which country's legal framework of these planes that are going from country to country? And who's in charge of the security and privacy of this data? Clearly, because of the disaster that's happened, there will now be the investment, and this should never happen again, or within a couple of years, it should never happen again. And it's going to create a major opportunity for us as an industry to move into Internet of Things, with the airplane being a thing. As we move to the Internet of Things society, we realize that an awful lot of this information that we needs to be in real time. The real crime around the MH370 was when it disappeared, why weren't military jets scrambled in 5 to 10 minutes to go and look for the plane? That information has to flow through the system and produce actions quickly in that example. Retailers are investing in wireless networks. We were talking about some of this at lunch. And they want to present you with promotions. So when you walk down a particular aisle, it says you can have $10 off this printer as you're walking past. The problem is they've got to deliver that data while you're in that aisle. If you've already walked on to the next aisle, it's too late. Why Cisco is so excited about the Internet of Things is not really enabling the device, but enabling real-time networks around the world, delivering higher performance, fast information. There are loads and loads of examples of how this has to happen really, really fast. If you hail a taxi, you want that taxi to come quickly. You don't want it to be delayed by network delays. So the transformation in networking is going to be dramatic. And you've seen through this event, unfortunately, we've had some Wi-Fi issues. Some of you haven't been able to submit questions. The network hasn't been robust enough. We're very sorry about that. The hotel's let us down. But the importance of real time, it's no good if we get your questions tomorrow when someone's on stage now. What I've been talking to you about is a transformation in our industry, creating new opportunities in many different spaces. I've talked to you about the need of a personalization in the sale, the transition to managed services, the importance of security, coming new technologies like 3D printing, like security, and of course, the transition to the hybrid cloud. It seems to us that you're going to move as a community more into vertical markets. You cannot be experts on all of this. And when we interview you, and we look at your websites, and we look at your marketing materials, we find you are still very much manufacturer-driven. The vast majority of your websites say, these are the products we sell, these are the manufacturers we work with, these are the services we provide. As we go towards this more sophisticated solution, we think you're going to have to change that. And you'll have to go to a model where you decide to focus on 1, 2, 3 verticals, sectors: healthcare, education, transportation, legal, whatever it may be, manufacturing, finance. It won't be possible, except for the very big companies, to be experts on each of this. So we see a move from generalist, vendor-led solutions to more advanced solutions on a vertical-based business. And if you can master some of these verticals, you'll build in more value because your expertise will go up. You'll be able to speak the language of a teacher or the language of a doctor, and it will be harder for companies next door to you to take that business away. So have a think about how you can move to a more vertical environment. So what I've talked to you about is an industry that has become much more complex. 5 years ago, your main occupation was deciding which server to sell, which processor, how much RAM, how much storage, which version of Microsoft software to put on that, configuring it and selling it. And that was what most of you were doing. That is no longer the case. You need to help your customers decide which operating system for which type of device: smartphone, tablet, PC. How many devices and which devices should they deploy? You need to help them with compliance so that they remain legal and the regulations in their country and in their industry sector. You need to teach them about the danger of state, the country stealing their data, and a competitor stealing their data. You need to talk to them about the journey to cloud and what works for them, most likely in a hybrid environment. And you need to talk to them about all these next new technologies. What this means is this industry is much more complex than it was 5 years ago. And where do you make money? You make money from complexity. When customers can't find the answer without speaking to an industry expert. And this is driving such fantastic growth for each of you, which I talked about at the beginning of this presentation. Complexity leads to profits. Your expertise in these areas will take you into a very prosperous future. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. I'm going to invite a couple of colleagues on stage, and then we're going to take some live questions if the Wi-Fi network allows. So Nicole, Matt, if you join me. Nicole runs our China business and is an expert on mobility. Matt's an expert on the infrastructure business based in the UK. Most of the ideas I present came from them. So, Matt, do you want to start by leading with the questions?
Yeah, so I've got an interesting question that came in. So what impact will the rising dollar have on technology markets in the Asia Pacific? So I guess you touched on that during the presentation, so do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, currency is having a big issue, a big play in our industry. Last year, obviously, we had currency crises in India and Indonesia, impacting sales there. And this year, very much the issue is since, May, June, the US dollar has really strengthened. That's the result of the US economy doing better than Asia, doing better than Europe. So technology prices are going to go up. And that's going to be a barrier to your growth. And it's not good news from a technology provider point of view. It was going to be a bit harder to sell. The good news is the US economy is doing better. That tends to motor the rest of the global economy. And over time, everyone will be lifted up by the success of the US. But prices will be going up in many categories. I think Microsoft's also putting some prices up in the Windows for Bing category during this quarter.
Great. I think it's now loading live. So the top question is a pretty interesting question, and I guess EMC are here in the room and probably could answer that themselves. But is EMC up for sale? And I guess I can have a stab at that one. I mean, obviously the media trained answer would be no. But if you look at what's sorry, there's obviously no. It's just rumours at the moment. But from what we're seeing, and as Steve mentioned it in his opening keynote, there's a lot of disruption with the vendors. A large number, HP announcing its split, Symantec, as well as Motorola a couple of years ago. So it's obviously natural for media attention to focus on companies like EMC, like Cisco, et cetera, about what parts of their business they can divest. But obviously they have a federated business that's been very successful, and potentially they could be under a lot of pressure from their investors as to find extra value by divesting. But
I have to say, though, I find it a bit odd. EMC is doing really well. If you look at their last quarter's results, they grew 9%. A big company growing 9%. So, yeah, the investors are putting EMC under pressure, clearly. But EMC, normally companies come under pressure when they're doing badly, and EMC is doing well. And to me, that just doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, you're right.
Good. Next question. Next question, surely by definition, is impossible to answer. What are the black swans that could impact the industry? If we knew what the answer was, it wouldn't be a black swan. The idea is that black swans are unpredictable. So I'm not quite sure how we answer that.
Well, I think there's grey swans, sort of bit of mix there, where you kind of they're knowns, but the impact is unknown. So things like deflation around the world, lower oil prices, disease like Ebola, unfortunately, that how that could spread, energy as well, and conflict throughout different regions. So, as Steve said, black swans are by definition impossible to predict, but certainly there's a lot of grey swans.
Yeah, true. The next question, let me try and read this. what will be the role of solutions distribution in the Internet of Things world? It's quite a difficult question. I said earlier that distribution and channel partners are doing really well, and this complexity is driving growth. And the two-tier distribution model has done very well and will continue to do very well. I think the answer is that the Internet of Things brings a lot of different industries together. You need intelligent buildings, intelligent vehicles, intelligent devices, and that all needs to be delivered together in a solution. And the distributors are the ones who should have the breadth of capability to join those solutions together so that they make sense. And that's their role. Companies like Honeywell, General Electric, as well as some of our sponsors, Schneider, Eaton, are very big in areas like intelligent buildings. And distribution is going in that direction and starting to draw it together. So I think they have a very strong role, providing access to the market. I don't know if either of you want to add anything.
No, I think...
Nicole, which Chinese mobile vendors have the greatest potential for international expansion?
Well, I guess recently the name of Xiaomi has generated a lot of attention in the Western media. But I think the potential of Xiaomi is not just about the cost of the device is very low price, because China is no longer having the advantage of manufacturing things at a very low cost. I think Xiaomi is all about the business model. They are presenting that Western world thinks it's very disruptive. So not just Xiaomi, and a few other names like Lenovo has been very committed, and they recently just finished the acquisition of Motorola. I think they have great potential to come up with a good business model that can be very disruptive as well. In addition to this, Oppo, you mentioned names, and also Yulong, all these vendors, if they are not just presenting as a very low-cost provider, as well as some new come up with new business model, they are the company you should look out for.
Okay, thank you. There's a question then: why are IBM and Lenovo not participating in the APAC event, in this event? I guess I can try and answer that. IBM took part in both our European and our Latin American events. Lenovo took part also in the European and Latin American events. I talked to you about China versus Asia and how different companies manage that. Both IBM and Lenovo have gone through quite a lot of changes in their organization structure in this region, and we haven't been able to, in the past, to join all those different groups together to make a combined decision. But I'm pleased to say that they almost certainly will be involved next year, certainly one of them and probably both of them. So their new organization structures have bedded down. They're able to operate across Asia now, and I think that will change. Okay, next question, Matt, probably for you. Do you view the physical security surveillance vertical as an interesting adjacent growth opportunity?
Yes, so when you look at things like smart buildings, for example, integrating the physical elements there, particularly with things like wearables, so adding proximity based on the presence to your PC, to your desk, so that when you move away, it locks the device, and also shuts down the lights, the air conditioning. In terms of other security, yeah, I think video, that's another opportunity to deploy wireless networks, fixed networks as well as kind of storage elements as well to store the video, as well as the analytics software, maybe to analyze movements and trends. So yeah, I think it's a big opportunity.
Okay, I don't want to avoid the next question. Why are all major vendors investing in cloud when you have told us that the last 3 years it is unprofitable? Good question. Think about that answer. First of all, US companies are very driven by their stock prices. CEOs are accountable to their investors. A CEO today who doesn't have a cloud strategy isn't credible. So that's one answer. Second answer, you have to go to where the market is going. And so they all need to find their journey or risk becoming irrelevant at some point. I think where the question is have some tried to go too quickly, then possibly they have. And generally, the on-premise model has been more profitable, far more profitable, for nearly all the traditional IT vendors than the cloud model. So have some pushed too quickly? Probably they have. So we would recommend, and we do recommend to them, that they offer a hybrid portfolio approach. And I think Thomas did talk about that on the Microsoft slide, that they sell on-premise, they sell off-premise, sell co-location, sell all the solutions, and let the customer decide, and more importantly, let the customer pick and choose what's right for which particular deployment. And so maybe some of the hype from the investment and share price community has come too strongly in some of the marketing messages, but they have to go to where the market's going. Will the cloud end like the .com era? Definitely not. But the infrastructure as a service model may end like the .com model. As I said, there will definitely be a shakeout. Nicole, do you want to talk about IT vendors in China and are they channel friendly?
Well, I think IT vendors in China, they are learning fairly quickly on what are the successful model is in different parts of the world. When they expand into EMEA, for example, Huawei, when they get into EMEA, they learn very quickly what should be the channel models in the region. So I think it's not about what they are friendly now, it's the capability whether they can learn quickly and adapt to the local models.
Okay, I think we've got 1 or 2 minutes left, so we'll try and tackle one of those questions. I guess we tackle the top one. Are tablets going to be acceptable in enterprise? Yes, of course they are. Many enterprises have deployed tablets, and it's a choice. Smartphone, phablet, we don't really like that word, large screen smartphones, tablets, PCs, different customers and different solutions will be deployed, and it's part of the portfolio. It's not one or the other, it's often both or 3 devices, but it's absolutely part of the solution, and I'm surprised that really the question is there. Okay, I think I'm sorry, we've got lots of questions coming through, but it's exactly 3 o'clock is when we need to close this session. So thank you very much. We're going to take a coffee break now. But just to warn you, something rather exciting is going to happen outside. So if you take your coffee in the open area, you should have quite a display going on, something rather unique. So thank you for your time, and see you during the rest of the event.